Welcome, dear listener, to Driftwood Stories, where candlelight flickers in forgotten windows and the wind tells tales through the trees. Tonight, let us walk together down an old cobblestone path, past the slumbering village and into the heart of the forest, where the moss is thick, the air is cool, and something ancient stirs beneath the leaves. This is a story whispered by firelight of two children, a loaf of bread, and a trail that vanished beneath the feet of birds, a tale where danger is wrapped in sugar, and safety is found in the smallest, bravest hearts. So rest your head, close your eyes, and follow the hush of the trees. The stars are watching, the forest is listening, and the story begins with Hansel and Gretel. Chapter 1. Breadcrumbs and Shadows. Long ago, where the trees pressed close around cobblestone paths and chimney smoke curled into the quiet evening sky, there lived a boy and a girl in a cottage no larger than a hay-cart. Their names were Hansel and Gretel. Their cottage stood on the edge of a worn village, nestled beside a sloping field of thistle and briar. The roof leaned left, as if dozing off mid-thought. Its shutters hung like sleepy eyelids, and moss crept up the stone walls in soft green strokes. Yet inside it was warm when the firewood lasted, and it smelled of thyme and worn wool. Hansel was the elder, bright-eyed, quick-footed, with a grin that could charm foxes. He loved to carve tiny birds from wood and tuck them into his sister's apron pockets. Gretel was younger, smaller, often quiet, but not timid. Her eyes were wise for her age, and her thoughts wandered like the wind beyond the hills. They were as close as twins, often finishing each other's stories and sharing dreams as if they were lanterns passed between hands. Their father was a woodcutter, a kind man with shoulders shaped by trees and hands like worn leather. His voice, though seldom raised, could fill a room like bread rising in an oven. But the world had grown lean. The forest no longer yielded as it once had. The woods sold for less, and snow came early. Their stepmother, a woman of cold lips and pinched brows, rarely smiled. She stirred the pot without tasting and measured flour with a stingy hand. She came from another village, one where kindness cost too much and softness was seen as weakness. One night, while the wind hissed beneath the door frame and frost painted stars on the windows, Hansel and Gretel lay awake beneath their blanket of patched wool. The fire had gone out, but their ears burned with what they heard. "There's not enough for 4, their stepmother whispered to their father in the next room. "The bread is gone, the broth is water. If we keep them, we all starve." The woodcutter's voice trembled. "They are my children, they are mouths," she replied, "and we are drowning." Hansel reached for Gretel's hand beneath the covers. Her fingers were cold. In the darkness, they listened as fate was decided. In the hush that followed, Hansel sat up slowly. He tiptoed to the small shelf near the door, where a chipped cup held what remained of the day's crumbs. Outside, moonlight lit the garden in silver-blue strokes. Quiet as a mouse, he slipped out into the night and filled his pockets with smooth white stones from the edge of the garden, pebbles he had once used to line a fairy circle beneath the elm tree. They glinted faintly in the moonlight like tiny waiting stars. He returned to bed without a word. Morning came brittle and pale with no scent of porridge and no hum from the hearth. The stepmother rapped on the door with false cheer. "Up, children," she called. "Your father is taking us for a walk in the woods. We'll gather kindling and wild herbs, perhaps even mushrooms if we're lucky." Hansel and Gretel dressed in silence. Gretel's fingers fumbled with her buttons, but Hansel touched her shoulder gently. "I have a plan," he whispered, and she nodded, not understanding but trusting. The forest greeted them with the sound of rustling leaves and the crunch of frost underfoot. The path wound deeper and deeper, past ferns bent beneath the weight of dew and roots twisted like old bones. Hansel walked behind them all, his hand in his pocket, dropping pebbles one by one along the trail. No one noticed. The trees grew taller, their branches interlocking like fingers in prayer. The sky disappeared behind a lattice of leaves, and the air grew cool and damp. Birds chirped from high above, watchful and quick. They reached a small clearing where a ring of toadstools circled a flat stone. "Here," the stepmother said abruptly. "Rest here. Your father and I will collect wood nearby." She turned. The woodcutter lingered, eyes on his children. He wanted to speak, to undo everything, but his voice failed him. He turned and followed her, his footsteps heavy. Hansel and Gretel waited and waited. The bird song faded. The wind slowed. Time stretched like taffy. "They're not coming back," Gretel said, her voice a fragile thread. Hansel nodded. "But we will." When the moon rose high, they stood and retraced their steps. The pebbles shimmered in the moonlight, each one a quiet promise that they were not truly lost. All through the night they walked, guided by those tiny gleams. The forest, though vast and dark, felt less cruel with each step toward home. And just as the first blush of dawn painted the sky, they saw it. The chimney rising behind the trees, the shape of their home against the soft blue of morning. Their father wept when he saw them. I feared," he whispered, pulling them close. The stepmother said little. Her face stiffened like old dough. That night there was bread, a crust shared between them, and silence at the table. But Hansel watched the stars from the window, and when Gretel joined him, he whispered, "They will try again." And this time he had no pebbles. Chapter 2. The deep green silence. The days passed with heavy feet and hollow bellies, though the fire crackled and the door no longer creaked with winter wind. Something colder had settled in the house. Silence. Not the peaceful sort, like that which follows a lullaby, but the tense quiet of words unsaid, of glances not returned. The children stayed near one another, sharing scraps and whispers. Their father tried to smile, but the lines around his eyes deepened, carved by worry and shame. Their stepmother moved like a shadow between rooms, never lingering, never warm. And then one night, as the wind brushed against the shutters like a sigh, it happened again. "We cannot feed them," she hissed when she thought they were asleep. This time, no stones, no turning back. The door was locked that night. No moonlight, no pebbles, no chance. Hansel lay staring at the wooden ceiling, teeth clenched in silence. Gretel, curled beside him, had wet lashes and a trembling breath. At dawn the knock came, soft, clipped, final. The basket held only one slice of bread each, hard as bark and nearly stale. Hansel tucked his inside his coat. "Eat," their stepmother said. "We'll need our strength for the walk." The path this time was different. The trees grew denser, older. Their trunks were wide and deeply grooved, with bark like cracked stone. The air hung thick with the smell of damp earth and pine resin. Hansel, though empty in his belly, did what he could. As they walked, he broke small crumbs from his bread, letting them fall quietly to the mossy trail behind them. The bits clung to root and leaf, barely visible, a trail fragile as hope. Their father did not meet their eyes. His axe swung low at his side, but he walked like a man being led to his own end. Even the stepmother's voice had quieted. Not cruel now, only cold, brittle as frost. They walked for hours. The sun, filtered through the green roof above, moved slowly, and the forest grew stranger. Birds here did not sing. They watched. Tiny eyes blinked in silence from the branches overhead. One followed them, a blackbird with glossy feathers, hopping just out of reach. It tilted its head curiously whenever Hansel dropped a crumb. At last they reached a hollow where ferns curled high and a fallen tree bridged a shallow ravine. The clearing was silent but for the whisper of leaves. "Stay here," said their stepmother. "We'll gather wood nearby." This time she did not bother to smile. They vanished into the underbrush, a rustle, a footstep, and then nothing. Hansel and Gretel waited, but the wind was still. There were no returning footsteps, no voices calling, only silence. Gretel sat down heavily on a moss-covered root, pulling her knees to her chest. "They've left us," she said. Hansel said nothing. Instead, he stood, turned, and began searching the ground for his trail of crumbs. But there were none. Gone. Not a flake, not a speck. The moss was bare. The path behind them was empty. Only the blackbird remained, perched on a low branch, beak dusted white, feathers puffed in satisfaction. Hansel's heart sank. I thought it would be enough," he whispered. Gretel stood beside him. Her small hand reached for his. "You tried." They wandered in slow circles that afternoon, hoping to find a familiar tree, a remembered bend in the path. But the forest, ancient and unkind, had shifted. Nothing looked the same. Roots tangled across the trail like twisted rope. The air grew cooler, darker. Every step forward felt uncertain. By dusk, they found a hollow between two tall oaks where the ground was soft and dry. They made a bed of leaves and lay close together beneath the branches. Gretel curled against Hansel's shoulder, and though her eyes closed, sleep did not come quickly. The forest creaked and sighed around them, not cruel but old. Trees groaned like great sleepy beasts turning in their slumber. Somewhere in the distance an owl called. "Are we going to die out here?" Gretel asked, barely louder than the wind. Hansel didn't answer for a moment. "No," he said at last. "We just have to keep walking. The woods go somewhere. They must lead out. But we don't know the way." He tightened his grip on her hand. "Then we'll make one." The night was long. In their dreams they walked through endless trees, and the stars blinked in and out above them like fireflies. They dreamed of warm beds and bread with butter, of their father's arms, of the sound of their real mother's laughter, long forgotten like the echo of a bell. At dawn, the forest was painted in mist. They rose, stiff and hungry, and continued walking. Each step was slower than the last. Their feet ached, their limbs felt hollow. They drank from a stream so clear it mirrored the sky, cupping the water with their hands like it was precious glass. They found mushrooms clinging to a log. Hansel sniffed them, remembered which kind the village healer once taught him were safe, and shared them with Gretel in silence. Still they walked, and the forest grew stranger. They passed a tree whose trunk was shaped like a spiral, a clearing of stones arranged like teeth, a patch of flowers that glowed faintly as if hoarding sunlight in their petals. The deeper they wandered, the more the forest felt enchanted. Not wicked, but not kind either. It watched. And somewhere beyond the trees, a scent drifted through the air, faint, warm and sweet, like bread baking, like cinnamon and clove. Gretel sniffed. Her eyes opened wider. "Do you smell that?" Hansel nodded, already moving forward. The forest, as if exhaling, made way. Chapter 3. The House of Sugar and Smoke. The scent wound through the trees like a ribbon. It danced along the pathless forest floor, twirling through ferns and over fallen logs, a sweetness so warm, so utterly out of place in the deep wood, that the children paused just to be sure it was real. It was. Vanilla and clove, warm honey and roasted hazelnut, ginger faint but growing stronger, and beneath it all a slow, smoky note, dark and rich, like something simmering low in a pot. They followed it. The trees grew thinner, as if politely stepping aside. The moss faded to soft grass, the shadows lifted, and then, like a secret revealed too quickly, the house appeared. It stood in a hollow ringed by twisted yew trees, half buried in golden light that poured through a break in the canopy. At first glance, it looked like a child's dream. Walls of gingerbread baked to golden brown perfection, their edges trimmed with icing like snowdrifts, shutters cut from sugared biscuit, window panes of crystal sugar glistening with candy glass cracks. A roof tiled in thick slices of baked apple, layered with toasted almonds and dotted with gumdrops the size of plums. A fence, low and curved, was made entirely of candy canes, some striped, some twisted like barley sugar. Gretel gasped. "It's beautiful!" Hansel reached toward a window frame and broke off a piece of sugar crust. It snapped under his fingers, crisp and thin, melting on his tongue with the sharp sweetness of spun syrup. Gretel joined him, tugging a sliver of gingerbread from the wall, giggling softly at the warmth still inside it, as though the house were somehow alive. Then the door creaked open, not wide, just enough to see shadow behind it, and a voice, smooth and syrupy, called out, "Well now, what hungry little birds have found their way to my garden?" The children froze. From within a woman emerged. She was old, older than anyone they had ever seen. Her back bent slightly, like a tree grown toward one side. Her face was covered in fine lines, like the cracks in sugared glaze, and her long white hair spilled over her shoulders like unspooled yarn. But her eyes, they were black, slick and shiny, like oil over water, and her smile was slow, almost amused. "Oh, don't be afraid," she crooned, opening the door wider. "You're thin as twigs. Come, come. You must be half-starved." Hansel stepped forward before Gretel could stop him. His belly ached, his legs trembled from days of wandering. The old woman clucked her tongue and waved them inside. Within, the cottage was impossibly cosy, dim but warm. Candles burned low in holders made from sugar-dipped antlers. A fire snapped cheerfully in a brick hearth, its smoke curling gently into a chimney of peppermint stone. Shelves lined the walls, jars of jam and preserved peaches, rows of dried herbs, pyramids of sweet biscuits, and little wooden boxes filled with candied violets and pressed lemon slices. A round table sat in the centre, already set for two. Thick mugs of warm milk steamed beside plates stacked with buttered toast, baked apples, sugared nuts, and soft rolls dripping with honey. "Sit, my darlings," said the woman. "Eat, rest," and so they did. The food was like nothing they had ever tasted, sweet and fragrant, rich with spice and warmth. Gretel's eyes fluttered with relief. Hansel leaned back in his chair, smiling for the first time in days. After the meal, the woman brought them warm cloths for their faces, little quilts stitched with ivy and sparrows, and even a comb carved from bone. "Sleep now," she said, her voice lower than before. "Tomorrow is a new day, a better one." She led them to a small room at the back of the cottage, where two beds, soft and clean, waited like a promise. Gretel nestled beneath the blanket. Hansel's breathing was already slow, steady, but the fire didn't crackle any more, and beneath the sweetness in the air was something else. Gretel listened, the creak of a floorboard, the sound of something scraping, metal on stone, and once, very faintly, a hum, low, tuneless, the kind of sound someone makes when they are very busy or very pleased. Sleep did not come easily, and when it did, it came with dreams. Hansel dreamed of a golden cage hanging from the ceiling of a dark room. Inside was a bird, white and small, singing with a voice like his own. Gretel dreamed of the forest, but the trees had mouths, and their trunks were faces, and all of them were whispering her name. The next morning came soft and golden, just like the one before. The birds outside chirped as if the world were unchanged, but when Gretel rose and padded to the table, Hansel was gone. The mug was cold, his bed untouched. The woman was not in the kitchen. The fire was low, and through the sugar glass of the front window, Gretel saw something that froze the breath in her chest. A cage, wooden, thick-barred, standing just beyond the peppermint fence. Inside it was her brother. Chapter 4, Cage and Cauldron. The sky was gentle and blue, brushed with feathery clouds that drifted as slow as thought. But beneath it, the clearing where the sugar house stood had changed. What had seemed like a dream now trembled at the edges. Gretel stood at the window, staring out at the cage. It leaned slightly to one side, lashed together with thick twine and blackened wood. Its bars were uneven, hand-carved, old. Inside sat Hansel, pale and dazed, clutching the slats with dirt-smudged hands. The morning light touched him like it wasn't sure it should. Gretel's heart pounded. The cottage behind her was quiet, no pots bubbling, no kettle whistling. The sweet smells had faded, replaced by something musky and sour, like rotting sugar or milk left too long in the sun. She opened the door and stepped outside. The The grass, once springy beneath her feet, now crunched faintly. The air held an edge. "Hansel!" she cried in a hushed whisper, running to the cage. He gripped her hands through the bars. "She tricked us," he said, voice low and tight. "The moment I woke, she dragged me out here, said I was too thin, but I'd fatten soon enough." His eyes were frightened, but not broken. "She's a witch, Gretel, I'm sure of it, and she means to eat me." Gretel glanced toward the house. The door stood ajar. From within came the low sound of something bubbling, a slow, wet simmer. She turned back to Hansel. "We'll get out. I'll find a way." Before he could answer, the voice called out, "No longer honey sweet. Well, out of bed early, are we?" The old woman stood in the doorway, no longer pretending, her shoulders hunched like a crow's, her cloak now tattered and stained with ash. Her long fingers curled around the frame of the door, and her smile stretched far too wide. "You've slept well, no doubt. Good. You'll need your strength." Gretel swallowed. Why is my brother in a cage?" The witch's eyes sparkled. "Because little boys are best when they don't run off. Can't have him wandering before he's ready for the pot, can we?" She laughed, a dry, brittle sound like twigs breaking under snow. Gretel backed away. The witch stepped toward her, robes sweeping the dirt. "Now you'll be useful. Firewood, cleaning, stirring the pot. I haven't had a good roast in years." Hansel shouted, rattling the cage. "You won't get away with this." "Oh, but I already have," she cooed, and so began the days of toil. Each morning the witch ordered Gretel to fetch kindling from the woods, sweep the sugar-dusted floor, polish the bone-handled cutlery, and skim the surface of the iron cauldron that hung over the hearth. It bubbled day and night with a thick, nameless stew that smelled of moss, ash, and old secrets. She was told to check the oven, to feed the flames and keep them hungry. And always, she was made to bring the witch a bowl of cream or jam for the boy to fatten him. But Gretel never brought much. She pretended to forget. She spilled. She dropped things accidentally. The witch grumbled, but her eyes were always elsewhere, focused on the cage and the stew and the fire that had to be just right. Each day she prodded Hansel through the bars. "Stick out your finger," she'd say. But Hansel, clever as ever, had found an old twig just the size of his smallest finger and held it through the bars instead. "Still too thin," the witch would mutter, lips curling with impatience. Days passed. The house seemed to grow darker. The sweet candy walls now sagged, dripping with syrup in places. The peppermint fence leaned like tired soldiers. The scent of the cottage grew sour and thick, but still Gretel played her part. She swept, she stoked, and she watched. She memorized the way the witch moved, the way she bent when she opened the oven door, the way her robes dragged near the flames. One night, beneath the stars that blinked silently above the trees, Gretel crept out to the cage. She and Hansel sat close, whispering through the bars. "Tomorrow," she said, "she'll grow tired of waiting. I can feel it." Hansel nodded. "What will you do?" "I'll stop her." Somehow. And then morning came, hot and strange. The sun rose red behind the trees, casting long shadows like fingers across the clearing. Inside the cottage, the witch cackled louder than usual. "Enough!" she bellowed. I won't wait another day for meat. Into the oven with him, thin or not." She spun to Gretel, her eyes gleaming. "Stoke the fire, hot as you can. I want it roaring." Gretel obeyed, slowly feeding the flames with dry kindling, careful not to show her trembling hands. The fire blazed, the oven roared, its open mouth glowed white with heat. "Now," said the witch, licking her lips, "climb in and check if it's ready." Gretel blinked. "Me? Yes, you useless twig. Check the heat. I haven't the knees for it." Gretel turned, peering at the gaping oven. "I don't understand," she said softly. "How do I get in? Feet first, head first?" The witch groaned, stomping forward. "Like this, you stupid." She bent, she leaned, she reached toward the oven, and with all the strength she had, all the fear and fury wrapped into one final act, Gretel shoved. The witch fell forward, a single yelp, short and sharp. Then fire. The door slammed shut with a clang. Gretel stood still, panting, staring at the latch. Inside, something thudded, crackled, then nothing, only smoke. Thick, sweet, and sharp. Outside, Hansel cried out. Gretel ran to him, found the key on the witch's shelf, and opened the cage. He fell into her arms. Neither of them spoke. The candy house was collapsing. The walls oozed, the roof sagged, the peppermint fence melted into the grass, the air was clearing, and the trees seemed to sigh. Chapter 5. The river remembers the way. The clearing lay silent. The sugar house, once proud and gleaming, sagged into itself. Its walls wept caramel tears. The roof curled like scorched parchment. A soft, sticky wind rustled through the leaves, carrying the last scent of clove and soot away into the branches. Hansel and Gretel stood in the open air, hand in hand, watching the remnants of enchantment melt into the soil. For a long while they did not speak. There were no words for what they had seen, no language for what had burned. At last Hansel turned to his sister. His voice was quiet but sure. "We have to go, before the forest changes its mind." Gretel nodded, and so they walked. Their feet carried them along no path, only instinct, but the air felt lighter now, and the trees less hostile. Where before the branches arched low and closed above their heads like fingers, now they reached skyward, letting in light. They passed a willow grove where the trunks leaned like old women in conversation. A rabbit watched them pass without darting away. The wind carried birdsong again, not sharp or mocking, but soft like lullabies. That night they made camp near a shallow brook. The stars above were brilliant, cold, clear pearls strung across deep velvet. They lay side by side on moss and leaves, neither quite able to sleep. Gretel stared upward. "Do you think the forest meant to help us?" Hansel turned his head. "No, but it let us go." In the morning the brook widened. It curled and curved, becoming a slow river, silver as moonlight, smooth as glass. Its banks shimmered with flat stones and old reeds. The water hummed gently, as though remembering a song from long ago. They followed it. The river curved through a glade where tall grass danced in waves. Past a cluster of birch trees, white and peeling like pages from an old book. Past hollow stumps where bees buzzed and the air smelled faintly of thyme. They found berries along the shore, not many, but enough. They drank from the river, the water cool and clean. It tasted of stone and sky and something else, memory. Gretel walked close to the edge, watching her reflection ripple. "Do you think Papa's looking for us?" Hansel didn't answer right away. Then, softly, "I think he never stopped." Later that afternoon they came upon a wooden bridge, weathered and bent, overgrown with moss and age. Beneath it the river widened once more, whispering around the stones. Beyond the bridge the land began to look familiar, the rise of the hills, the tilt of the trees, a crooked old fence buried in weeds. Hansel stopped, squinting through the branches. "I know this place." Their pace quickened. The wind picked up behind them, as if urging them forward, and then, like a dream rediscovered, the cottage appeared. Still leaning slightly to one side, still roofed in crooked shingles and draped in creeping moss. Smoke curled faintly from the chimney, not sweet, not strange, but real. Wood smoke, home. Their father was in the garden, kneeling over a bed of scraggly carrots. His hands were in the earth, his back was bent. He did not see them at first. "Papa," Gretel whispered. He looked up, and everything stopped. The spade fell from his hand. His knees hit the dirt, and he ran. He reached them before they'd taken another step, folding them both into his arms. The tears that came then were not loud, just quiet, steady, like the rain that waters dry ground. He held them, rocking slightly, as if to convince himself they were real. I feared." "We're safe now," Hansel said, voice muffled by his father's coat. "We're home." Inside, the cottage had changed. It was still small, still threadbare, but something was different. Warmer. Their stepmother was gone, left in the night without a word. Some said the woods took her. Others said she feared what she'd done, but no one ever saw her again. In the weeks that followed, food returned to the table. Not much, but enough. The garden grew. The fire stayed lit. Hansel carved again, leaving wooden birds on the windowsill. Gretel began to hum while stirring soup, a tune only the forest would know. They told no one of the witch, no one of the candy house, or the fire, or the cage. But at night, when the wind whispered through the thatched roof, they would look at each other and remember. They remembered the cold, the quiet, the hunger, and they remembered what it meant to hold on, to each other, to courage, to the path only love can make through darkness. Years passed. Seasons turned. And though Hansel and Gretel grew, the bond between them never broke. They became part of the village's stories, the children who vanished and returned stronger, wiser. Some said they were blessed. Others whispered that the forest had taught them its secrets. But those who truly knew them, their father, the animals who watched from the woods, the river that remembered their feet, knew the truth, that the darkest roads, the strangest forests, and the hungriest shadows are no match for a brave heart, a clever mind, and the hand of someone who will never let go.